Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. In today's topic, we're going to be talking about everything practice management, the different components of practice management, and broken it down into subcomponents, the highlights of these subcomponents, and things that you should keep in mind as you, as a legal professional, start to work through your business, as well as be aware of all of the mandatory requirements. And the suggestions and the components that the law society of your jurisdiction has as an emphasis as you go through your legal business. Now, today's session has been approved by the Law Society of Upper Canada for 1.5 hours of CPD credits, because we sometimes do deliver this in person, and it has been approved for 1 hour of CPD credits by the Law Society of British Columbia. So for friends, legal professionals joining us from different parts of Canada, we kindly request you to send us an email with the confirmation of your participation, and also please do log into your corresponding websites or portals to clock the corresponding CPD hours. Okay? And again, just a quick reminder, kindly do mute your phones, and kindly do use the chat window to ask any questions that you may have. All right, so we've broken down today's conversation as well as the presentation into the following topics for the agenda, as every uLaw webinar does have one. So if you really look at the different obligations that you have as a legal professional in your jurisdiction, we've broken it down based on looking at content on the web, looking at the Law Society's bookkeeping compliance, their obligation compliance, audit channels, and we've broken it down into these different business components. You have your client intake, service, and communication. So we're going to talk about things to keep in mind as you start intaking that client, the first communication that you have with him or her or an entity, how you can manage and maintain service levels, important things to keep in mind as you communicate with your client, and vice versa, expectations that you can set clear about the expected levels of service that you would offer to these clients. And then come down to, once, let's say, you have taken that client in as a client, things to keep in mind with regards to file management, which then chronologically leads you into financial management, because let's say you've created a file, either in the case of a retainer or just docketing your time and invoicing, there's going to be financial components involved. We're then going to move into things to keep in mind from a business management perspective. So let's say you've done the matter, you worked on it, you raised an invoice, then comes the component of how much of revenue did you actually make in serving that client through that matter. And the last three components, which are not necessarily contributing to a legal aspect of your business, but purely based on you being a legal professional and a professional to begin with. So you've got your professional management, how you bring the ethics that you've learned, and you participate and you practice as a legal professional. We'll talk about the expectations around that. With trust funding and using trust money appropriately being a big part of that professional management. Time management, there's a very key component to legal life is maximizing the time that you have available and spreading it across various aspects of life, both legal and personal, and even within the legal life, depending on your practice and depending on the different areas of practice that you focus on, time management becomes very critical so that you can take care of everything that needs to be taken care of, and if possible, in a very proactive manner. And last but not least, focusing on the personal management, so outside the work hours and outside of who you are as a legal professional, as it can be a bit of a strain over the day, and it's one of those stressful jobs that has been considered one of the stressful careers, being a legal professional, that you come across various different aspects of clients, varieties of problems that you handle. If you want to take some time off, ensure that you're giving back time to your life so that you can be rejuvenated and come back the next day with a lot of focus. Okay, so we're really going to break down these core subject areas, if you will, under the obligations, and then look at them and have a deeper dive and look at them individually. Okay, so the first and foremost obligation that we've looked at, as I mentioned, is the client intake, service, and communication obligations that you have. Okay, so we've again further broken down this subject matter into various subcategories, if you will, and we can talk about this individually for a longer time. But for the purposes of today's webinar, we're going to quickly highlight what these mean. So from a client intake perspective, we look at ensuring that there's a detailed recording of all the consultations and the calls or the in-person meetings that you have with a client. As you navigate through the various phases that a client goes through, right? So it can be a prospective client, someone who's just calling your law office to get a bit of a consult. You may actually, as a marketing method, provide, let's say, a half an hour or a 1 hour free consult and market that on your website. At that point of time, a prospective client is, looking to just get a little bit more of advice and understand who you are, how you serve other clients, and get a feel for it. So starting with that, to then dealing with ghost clients. And these are clients who were prospective clients, have given you some information, maybe their address, their phone number, right? And maybe spoken a little about what they would look to engage you with, but never engage you in that. So never retain you, never engage you. You have all this information they've given you. And you obviously deal with them as a ghost client. To a classic ideal example where a prospective client turns into a real client who's actually retained you. The obligation still remains that you ensure there's a detailed recording of all those conversations. And if it does percolate into a matter, ensure those notes are available across that file. Now, before creating that file or that matter, a good prerequisite to always keep in mind is ensuring that you're performing what they call as a conflict check or a confidentiality check or conflict screening, as it's commonly known. And this is to ensure that you have all of the information, that you're well informed about this client, this individual, and ensuring that you have full information about if you've ever come across this individual or entity or other, an individual within a business entity, and if you've dealt with this individual before, do you have any information that may otherwise misrepresent the conflicts? Recording that, so the Law Society does give you a very good report where you can document the various facets of your conflict screening. Was it a conflict? No conflict? If there was a conflict, what have you decided? Have you decided to still go ahead and create a file for this individual? And in so which case, how are you looking to handle that conflict, right? Or if you're not going to deal with this client and if it's a conflict, are you passing this individual's business to another colleague of yours? So the Law Society obviously encourages you to document as much as possible within those conflict screening phase of client intake. Okay. Now let's assume you've gone ahead. Let's assume for the case of this conversation that there is really no conflict. You've kind of full information about this individual. You're going to go ahead and create that file, right? Now, once you do create that file, one of the first things that you want to communicate with your client, let's say that he or she is sitting right opposite your desk. One of the first things, or even on the phone, one of the first things you want to establish are the rules, especially around the fees. What are the rules that govern the engagement? Are you a legal professional that accepts retainer? So do you have a trust fund or do you have a trust account where you accept retainers as a way of paying for your fees? And in which case, what are those rules that govern that retainer? How often do you need to top up that retainer? How often do you schedule invoices, so really determining the fee structure and how the components of fees, including disbursements, whether you're going to charge them on a billable basis, or is this a flat rate? Is this a contingency fee? There's various components to those fee structures, right? So you want to keep in mind that coming up with a template or repurposing a template from a colleague or utilizing practice management templates that give you a structure or a foundation to document all these different facets of a retainer letter, let's say, or an engagement letter, is a must and is a mandatory step, or is a really good step to keep in mind as you go through this phase of client intake, service, and communication. Okay. Now let's say that retainer letter has been documented, it's available, it's now signed off on, you've signed it, the client signs it, and he or she then agrees to pay you, let's say, $1,000 retainer as part of that engagement so that you can then go and represent them. Now, as you know, that retainer amount needs to go into your trust account. You can't put it into your general account because it needs to go into a trust account. You'd have to do the proper steps of docketing your effort, invoicing for that effort, and then moving the eligible trust amount from the trust account into your general account. Okay? So keeping in mind the communication, whether that's an invoice, whether that's a statement of account, whatever the purpose of the document that you're generating may be, you're still communicating to your client. A retainer receipt is a great communication, ensuring that we're all on the same page, that it's $1,000 that they pay to you, right? It's very important that you deposit that retainer into your trust account, provide a receipt, and as you work through your file, giving them constant communication about the work that you're doing, the amount of money that's going to be withdrawn, and constantly notifying or reminding them of any top-ups on retainers that are required. So don't give them the common story that we've heard from the industry is, don't keep your client waiting, and there's no surprises. Don't leave them with surprises, with one fat bill at the end of Thanksgiving evening. And one of the anomalies, or one of the common things we see, really depending on the situation, some clients never have to deal with this, some clients deal with this all the time, is a letter of non-engagement. Let's say you've retained the client. For some reason, either the client non-engages you or you non-engage the client. So it's a two-way street. Regardless of what the reason is, ensure that there's a proper process as well as a documentation available, readily available. So you either, again, go back to your colleague, go back to the industry, or use the templates by the practice management softwares can provide and tweak it to your own purpose. Have a template available for such non-engagements. A great recommendation that's being made. And the reason for that is ensuring that you have a proper documented way of communicating, all part of that communication, communicating to your client that you're not responsible for handling his matter or her matter going forward because you've decided to not engage. And if you have to return that retainer, again, you draw the boundaries, you draw the roles, ensure that you've agreed upon either refunding the retainer, or if you've put an effort so far, then moving that eligible trust money and refunding the remainder of the retainer, whatever the situation may be. Okay? Now in this slide, what we're trying to illustrate is, the first slide was obviously the different phases of it. And in this particular slide, we're trying to communicate what could be the typical set of documents that you probably should be aware of, or maybe already aware of, and remind yourself that you keep in mind as you document these templates. Okay. So one of the first documents we spoke about was the retainer agreement or an engagement agreement. If you don't have trust and you're just dealing directly with the file with a leap of faith that the client's going to pay you purely based out of your general account, it then becomes an engagement letter. You're still going to say, I'm going to represent you, define the nature and scope of the matter. Very important. Is this a highway traffic matter? This is small claims. This is a criminal matter, family, divorce. You really want to outline the nature and the scope of that matter. Keep in mind, it's a great habit. It's something that is not seen most often. It's definitely something to keep in mind. It's also define the responsibilities of your client. Okay? Not just about who you are as a legal professional and what you bring to the table. It's also communicating clearly in that document what you expect from the client as part of this golden handshake. For example, the payment terms, a very common example that you want to establish. You want to establish that you expect the client to pay you for any money owing within a certain time. So let's say it's at net 30, net 60, whatever you agree upon, put that on that document. It's a responsibility of the client. Also go and establish if you're going to charge an interest if he or she doesn't pay you on time, what the implications are if that doesn't happen, right? Scheduling and the course of representation. So outlining how you're going to go about managing your time in representing, ensuring that the court times are well documented, well met, and if you actually need your client to be at court, ensuring that you have a calendar system that can send out invitations to your client, making sure that he or she is constantly reminded to be there. Okay, so keeping a schedule of things to do. Again, that could be a parallel to your client responsibility, making sure they make the time to be available if they are required at court. Method and frequency of communication is another important component of that agreement or engagement or retainer letter. How often should the client expect correspondence from you? Is that an email correspondence, or are they expecting, a mail via post, right? Those are the types of things you want to establish as part of that retainer or engagement letter. And this could be various different types of documents. If it's a retainer letter, a receipt, this could be financial documents, including invoice, establishing how you want to go about sending those invoices. Is this going to be on a weekly basis, or is this going to be at a minimum once every 2 weeks? So really depending on the nature and scope of matter, obviously these components would change, right? Termination details, we spoke about that. If shit were to hit the fan, document that ahead of time. If they don't pay you, if they default paying you a couple of times, maybe that's a great sign to not engage. Or if they're not topping up your retainer in time, that's a sign for non-engagement. Ensuring there's a client confidentiality as part of that. So you're liable for not sharing your client information. You're going to put all of that. And this is a very new thing that they've added with the advent of technology, with cloud, internet being a big part of the legal play today. It's communicating to your client some of the risks that are involved with the types of communication methods that you may use. Email, for example, right? This is just, I would say, a larger subset, if you will, of things to keep in mind as you outline and document that retainer or engagement letter with that client. And we've taken this one document as an example. Okay, so if you look at the many different documents that come into play, including your invoices, you want to keep in mind there's a very formal structure to how you raise that invoice, the name of your firm, your individual name if you have to, the name of your client, their address, so the correspondence address is on that invoice, ensuring that you outline very clearly the work done, any transactions that have happened during the time period for which you're raising that invoice, including any retainers that you received, have you received it. So make it as simple yet as elaborate as possible for your client to appreciate the work done and where they are in that whole process and where you are with regards to taking the money that is owed to you. Okay. So we've looked at client intake, service, and communication as one of the first obligation subject matters then we're going to look at the second subject matter, which is truly the file management. So in our story, let's assume we've got the client, gone through the conflict screening, we've created the matter, we have agreed upon a retainer, and we've started to work towards solving the problem or getting this individual client working on this matter. And this is internal to you to a certain extent, but also has a few components that may be relevant to your client. Okay, so from a file management perspective, one of the recommendations that the Law Society has, ensuring that you have a checklist of incoming matters, okay, that are concerning those incoming matters. So a checklist could be right from your client intake, things to keep in mind. Is this for a certain area of practice? Who is going to be dealing with this file? Have I dealt with this file type of file before? Is this a flat rate file? Is this a different components of that file? Having a checklist of things to keep in mind. Ensuring that the conflict screening that you completed. So the Law Society again has, as I mentioned, a report that outlines how you determine that the client is not a conflict. So having that a part of that file. Okay, so file management is all about collating all of the documents and the proof of each and every step that has been accomplished in representing that individual thus far. So a conflict screening report would be a great part of that file and part of that matter. A very important, and I've repeated this many times in my previous presentations of this webinar and other webinars, a very important point to keep in mind is separating out files for each respective matter. And a great example is within our company, we've served many clients, and every time we get a new client in, there's always a different situation that we have to deal with. And we had this one client that we were migrating over, and what was interesting to see is that this individual actually had the same file number based on the client. And the client may have had multiple matters. They all had the same file number. And that was interesting. It was kind of concerning as well. But it's important to keep in mind that even if it's the same client, if you're dealing with multiple matters for that same client, a classic example would be of a real estate lawyer. Sometimes the lawyer is involved with both the purchase and the sale of the property for the same client. But it's important to keep in mind those are two separate matters, two separate transactions, if you will, and they both need separate matter file numbers. Find a way to organize, right, these files, if possible, in an electronic medium to safeguard information, obviously with the bells and whistles that surround it, including security, password protection, etc. But have a mechanism that you can now chronologically in a secure manner store these files. It doesn't have to be electronic. It could be, in a paper file management system like the old days. Electronic is just a convenience, if you like to. Recording of all of the client interactions, so your emails, your phone conversations, maybe written letters, all that goes into that file with regard to that one file number or matter number, however you like to call it. And an important component of how you name these are the fact that it's got to be unique, right? So we talked about that. A file that's easily cross-indexable. So for example, if you've got an individual for a particular matter and you come across this individual's family member or spouse on a totally different matter, being able to quickly cross-index, that's a part of your conflict screening. But unless you have it organized where you're able to capture the client information, the file number, you're not able to cross-index that relationship between these two clients. Okay? Because that's a fundamental need for you to have a proper conflict screening done. So the top 5 or 6 components, keep it unique across matters. Have a checklist available so that you're doing the right things as you create that file. record every transaction that happens within that file, and have a way of creating a file number that's unique, chronological, and can be cross-indexed. So now we move on to the next subject matter, which is the financial management. So let's say you've got this client, you've done the conflict screening, you've done all of the communication properly. Now you've moved on to actually creating a file for them, and you've done all the right things of managing and maintaining the files. Now move on to getting that retainer. You've signed up the retainer, and you're ready to go. And we spoke about briefly as we started this webinar. One of the obligations that you have is to ensure that you communicate a proper fee schedule, really depending on the nature of this matter, of how you go about charging your client. Okay? There's two components to it, of the financial management. Is how you manage the finances of this matter, which also kind of leads to your business management aspects. And the other aspect to it is how you communicate these numbers and the components that build the financial management building blocks, if you will, back to your client, either through an invoice, bill of cost, statement of activity, etc. Right? Very important is point number 2. A prompt or periodic transmission and delivery of invoices to client. So you establish this in your communication, but ensure it happens. So let's say you establish that you will do a flat fee. You don't want to charge your client on a billable time. Okay, so don't leave them second guessing. As I said, no surprises. Keep it as simple yet elaborate as possible. Okay, elaborate doesn't have necessarily mean fancy. Doesn't have to be, let's keep it simple. I guess that's as simple as the words I can get for today. The third component that we've outlined here is a way for you, this is for internally for the legal professionals, because this is another horror story that we hear from clients, is a way for you to track of any underpayments or overpayments on accounts, okay, or withdrawals, underpayments. Either there's a problem where the client doesn't pay the exact amount, and this becomes a bigger problem when you don't have a retainer involved, in which case you're going back and you're then discounting invoices or you're writing off invoices, etc. So you really want to keep tab on that, as well as ensuring that you're tracking sometimes overpayments. And this is an example where you don't have a retainer, but there's a couple of matters that are involved, and the client just gives you one check and asks you to then divvy it up across matters. These are some common examples, financial situations that you come across with the client and the file that you want to be aware of and take the right steps to handle those situations. Managing your disbursements and general receipts out of your general accounts. This is for clients who don't, for both clients who use trust or don't use trust. Right? If you're going to be paying disbursements of your general account, please make sure you have all of those receipts available, because you're going to include that in your invoice. And if the client does ask for a proof of that disbursement, you probably do have to send it. For example, we've had situations where you send a court fee or an application fee. Clients may actually ask you for a proof of you having paid that $90. So keep those receipts intact. Keeping in mind, as you go through the different flavors of financial management, whether it's raising the invoices, leading to your revenue, leading to your HST, leading to the disbursements, leading to expenses, the bookkeeping component or the bookkeeping software that you're maintaining as a legal professional is trying or will try to catch up as much as possible to what's actually happened in real life. Right? In real life, we talk about the bank accounts. We talk about both trust and general, the accounts that you have in your bank. We're trying to reconcile or maintain the books within your bookkeeping software to be as close as possible, both in time as well as in dollar amount, to the information that's available in the bank. So keep a copy of all those bank accounts. If you do electronic banking, it's much more simpler. If you have an online account, you can always log in and download those different monthly bank statements. But if you have to visit the teller, then you want to keep in mind that you sign up for monthly bank statements to be mailed to you, so you have a physical copy at least that you can use to reconcile your accounts. Also keep in mind common, I would say, error points where you don't think it's a big deal, such as canceled checks and even duplicate deposit slips. And why you do all this is to ensure that you're one step ahead of everything that's required to prepare you both for a law society audit, as well as to ensure that you as a business are performing very well with some tremendous health in the business. Okay, so you're measuring how you're performing as a business. If you're doing very well, you're going to continue down that path. If you're not doing very well, then you're going to reflect on it, take a step back, and pivot or move on to the positive direction. Either ways, you need to be able to record it, track it, measure it, and reflect on it. So unless you're doing the three things ahead of time, for which you need a process, and these are some of the components that you certainly should keep in mind with regards to your financial management. So here are some of the documents, that you should definitely keep in mind. It is part of your law society's compliance to generate these documents. And again, based on your practice, based on your style, trust, general involving, you certainly want to have your ledgers. And we've done a separate webinar which talks only about the law society requirements, only talks about the financial aspects. And we welcome you to visit our website, go to our YouTube channel to check out those webinars as well. Because you do gain CPD credits for certain recorded sessions as well. So keep in mind that these are some of the top documents that you always should keep in mind to generate as proof of those financial management, your ledgers, both trust and general, and this is done for a time period. Technically, it's done for a month on month. You could also generate it by client. The journals, your receipt journal, both for your trust and general. Your disbursement journal, very important, again, both for your trust and general. And most importantly, the reconciliation of trust and general. It starts with the reconciliation so that you're very confident about the data that you have, and then you generate all these ledgers and journals because those numbers would then reflect the true aspect of your business. Okay? Once you've reconciled on that month, you know that the numbers match, you know there are no anomalies, and hence the ledgers should reflect the same. Okay. I think we're moving along. In the next 25 minutes, I would like to cover the next set of subject matters that we've looked at. Okay. Let's do a quick recap. I think that's one of the things that was asked as a question for someone who just joined a bit late. Okay, so we started off with the obligations, which is really a big part of today's Everything Practice Management. We looked at client intake, service, and communication. That was number one. And we moved on to file management, all the different things you want to keep in mind when you create that file, keeping it chronological, searchable, cross-indexable, etc. We jumped on to financial management and the things to keep in mind right from the steps you have to take, the communication you make with regards to financial aspects of that transaction, as well as the documents that you as a legal professional are obligated to produce on a timely basis to your auditors or keep so that if asked, you can always present it. We have 4 more such components of our professional obligation, and we're actually moving on to the business management aspect to it. Okay? All right. So the first 3 areas were typically to the legal aspect to it, a matter, a client. How do you deal with the finances of that? And we're not going to go, deep dive into those. You know what you're doing. There's other sessions that we conduct that do a deeper dive. So let's say you've done all of that. Then comes the layer of you managing your business. So you are a paralegal, a lawyer, a legal professional in Canada, and if you are a sole proprietor or a small firm that's looking to grow your business, make your money out of that to have a happy living, then a very important component to keep in mind, build intelligence, read about it, take courses, whatever you have to be at CPD sessions like these, but be very cognizant of the business management aspect to who you are and what you do. Okay? Things to keep in mind, and we've advocated this many times. Depending on the time and age that you're in, you're always going to change how you look at things and adopt to changing times. In today's day and context, in 2017 and moving forward, you really want to think about technology and how it can help you, how it can amplify your effort so that you're being more efficient. And that could actually be many times a bit of a trade secret. If you're using software to automate many of your tasks, then you come across as a very efficient, timely person, someone that clients want to deal with. We've kind of broken it down to maybe 3 or 4 components that you want to keep in mind as you start to look at how you want to deal as a legal business. Software, very critical, right from your email to security systems, to document management, to practice management, legal accounting, some products that kind of combine all of these components. It could be on the cloud, it could be on premise, regardless. Keep in mind security components that go behind protecting your data and your client's data, and always ask the what ifs. If this is an on-premise software, what if your laptop or your computer were to crash? Okay, how do you deal with that? If this is a cloud-based system, then what if there's a breach of security, or how does that software company deal with such issues? We've just heard about, I'm sure you've heard about the Uber story, right? So you want to be cognizant of those components. Even if this was your laptop, what level of security do you have so that, is it password protected? Does this have a strong password? Is this something that people can't necessarily hack into? If it's on-premise, the bigger question is, what have you done to do the regular backups, right? Because if it's a cloud-based software, you can be rest assured majority of companies do automatic backups on a daily, if not an hourly basis. So you do have a bit of an insurance there with regards to files being backed up. But if this was all yourself, all you, do you hire an IT specialist to come help you do that, or are you cognizant enough to do it yourself? Ask those questions before or at any time given in your business management. Now, do you bring mobile devices to the equation? Okay, you're on the go all the time, juggling between your work, other places, court. So if you are carrying your legal accounting and practice management aspect or softwares on your phone, how are you ensuring security? Password protection, again, how secure is it? Is that a facility or something that you're using for the benefit of your client? Okay, are you using the latest device? Are you using the latest patch on that device? Very important to ask yourself those questions. And if you want to stay competitive in today's industry, you obviously want to be able to provide that level of service level that your clients are going to expect out of you, out of a legal professional in today's day and age. So gone are the days where you can respond saying, hey, I can't get that information, because that's in my desktop in my office, and I don't think I'm going to get to my office till Monday morning, right? People are going to be, don't you have access to this stuff from other areas? This could be a computer-based software or on-premise based software, but you still want to understand how you can stay competitive, how you can be with that 21st century legal professional who has access to that information, but in the most secure way. Only you have access to information, making sure others don't, what you've done to safeguard it. If it's cloud, obviously it's all available. And this is not just for legal accounting or practice management software. This is for everything, right? From your office. You're talking about a mobile office today, access to emails, having access to even your voice messages, right? So if you use a software such as RingCentral, for example, if you're connected with a voice over IP phone like Vonage, these tools and softwares give you the flexibility to send your voice messages to your phone as an email with the actual content as an audio file, right? Or if you still have to go to your office to dial in the password and pick up the voice message from that individual phone, then those are the Nortel stories that you be telling yourself. Let's move on to professional obligations. So we looked at business management. So really critical is what goes into your business, the expenses, types of things that you want to keep in mind as you run your business. And we're going to also look at components of the legal business as it percolates to the financial management aspects to it a bit later. Professional management, obviously you know this best. You always want to keep yourself updated with regards to what the profession demands out of you, how you can represent this industry and your other colleagues in this industry. Some of the obligations that you have obviously include completion of required CPD hours, right? You're doing a great job of being here today, collecting those CPD hours, hopefully using what you've gained and the knowledge that you've gained today in your practice. That would then reflect the learning that you've had and a self-reflection. And I think there are more professional, substantial, everything that allows you to be a more wholesome legal professional. Ensuring that you're all constantly on top of new legislation and case laws. You're always talking about, the newer things that are happening, the newer types of matters, the nuances of these things, how you can better sharpen yourself to be, a legal professional who's very confident and is always on top of the information that's required to do what you do best. Reviewing professional conduct guidelines. Okay, so this is a very critical component. You can go to your LSUC or you can go to the individual law society's website and you should be able to download these guidelines. Okay, what is the expectation of the professional conduct? How do you conduct yourself? We've heard of, many matters or many cases against legal professionals today of assaults of various levels. So you definitely want to be cognizant of the expectation and how you are required to represent yourself and the industry and the society, I think, that you're representing, right? There's a certain level of respect that the general public has with regards to each profession, and the legal industry is one profession that there's both a little bit of a fear factor and with high respect, right? So how you conduct yourself means a lot, not just yourself, but to your society as well. And last but not the least, being part of professional associations. This is not mandatory. This is just a recommendation, a best practice. You have dentist associations. Each profession, even for masseuses, even for every professional service, have associations or a common thread that people can go talk to, share common concerns, common successes, learn from each other, understand what's happening, not just for software tools, but for other ways of handling cases, etc., etc. You really want to be part of that group where you can resonate similar concerns and thought process. It also gives you the opportunity to sometimes even save time and money, learn something that you haven't known before. There are certain associations that provide you with discounted software, hardware, can really help you out on the business aspect as well. And we see a big part of being a part of such associations is also room for collaboration. Okay, so today you're a sole practitioner. If you really want to grow that firm, you may now have an opportunity to go meet this person in an association, have common vibes, and we've seen that happen where people have actually started a firm joining hands together. Okay, so now this is a very generic topic. You've got books written on this for ages now. But our focus in talking about time management is really knowing and understanding the legal space and keeping in mind how you manage time with regards to who you are and what you do. For example, a task list is a task list is a task list, but it's very important that you can tie that to both a matter that's either matter-driven or personal life-driven. Okay, so being at court obviously is matter-driven. You're at court for a specific matter or for a bunch of matters. But if you're going to just visit your friend at court, then that's a different matter. But regardless, keeping a to-do list, especially if you're running areas of practice that require you to be managing multiple files at the same time. Okay, so if you're just dealing with one file and then that's all that you're going to do one at a time, that one file is going to give you enough revenue to keep you going. Now that's a different case. There's a different type of time management that's required for that. But what we see most often is legal professionals multitask. There's a need of the hour to actually have multiple files handled, each file having its own life cycle. Okay, so a task list or a to-do list is a definite must so that you can manage your time better as a legal professional. Little tricks of the trade is also be able to classify or categorize the work that you're doing, the files that you're handling. Sometimes you don't want extra information, so if you can categorize files as active or closed or otherwise, so that your focus is only on the active files that you have to work on, any little thing that you can do to save yourself time to focus on your work goes a long way. And the third component, which we were a part of a recent survey and we had provided our feedback to the Law Society as well, is the pro bonos or the non-billable time that legal professionals spend and not being able to track that. So as legal professionals, there's two aspects to the non-billable of time management. One is the time that you spend outside of matter, doing other things to manage your business, etc. But the other aspect to the legal aspect of time management is the pro bonos and the unbilled hours, right, that you docket and don't track. And if you're not tracking, as I said, if you're not storing it, you're not tracking it. If you're not tracking it, you're not going to be measuring it. If you're not measuring and tracking and storing it, you're not going to be able to reflect in time the consequences that it can lead to. Okay? So please do make it a point. If you already have a process, fantastic. If you don't, there's always a good start. To always keep a tab and a process to manage your unbilled time. How did that go? How did that 4 hours of that day go away if you're not able to show it on revenue records, right? So keep that, this are the three different components from a time management perspective that we want to reflect on. Again, ensure that you have the time to manage your business, stay on top of, use software to automate things that you don't otherwise have to spend manually, right? Then take the time to be used elsewhere more efficiently. And we then finally jump on to kind of the last aspect of subject matter, which is really the personal management, right? What you do as a legal professional obviously is a great service. It's a business to begin with, but fundamentally at crux is a service that you, as out of a passion, are providing to your clients. But many times that comes at a cost, whether it's burn rate, whether it's frustration or otherwise, or lack of time for other things. Any professional has to be happy and satisfied with the service and the work that he or she is doing, to find ways that you enjoy what you do. And this is not just a legal practice, but components of legal practice, right? So especially if you're just getting in, you don't know which area of practice is going to flourish for you as a business. So obviously you're going to jump into anything and everything you get, right, from small claims to real estate, to, depending on who you are, a paralegal or a lawyer. But if you're finding a way that you're happy doing a certain area or a couple of areas of practice, try to build a discipline around it, be happy with what you're seeing as results, and focus on it, and try to get away from areas of practice that are, first, are not satisfying, and two, are taking away a lot of your time. And if it's not giving you revenue, then 3 strikes. And one of the things we've seen is if you've succeeded to, again, with any business, and especially with legal business, if you found a way, if you found the mojo to run your business for the first year, 2 years successfully, you've gained a certain level of Rolodex of clients, you've collaborated with the industry well enough to be recognized as a legal professional, then I think you've done yourself really well. A good majority of legal businesses tend to either close down or otherwise within the first 12 to 18 months, if you will. So it's important that right from day one, you find a way to measure how your business is doing. You want to reflect on it more proactively than as a reaction to a situation. There's no money in my bank account, so let me look at what happened in my business, right? So that's a typical thought process. But if you can find a way to be disciplined, to look at it on a weekly, monthly basis, then you're going to do yourself a lot of good. You're going to focus your energy to actually make it happen. So keeping a tab on your financial success and the small wins that you have are very critical. And we've spoken about this at webinars. We've spoken about this at seminars in person. It's very important for legal professionals to take time off. It's that time of the year. Have a budget. I know it's easier said than done, but if you can have a budget every year to actually find a new place to go to, that really helps you rejuvenate, come back. And the reason we say that is because the multitasking that's required. So the brain obviously has a lot of potential, but more you strain that brain with multiple things to think at the same time. It's not just the multiple aspects of legal business, it's the business aspect to it, the compliance aspect to it, ensuring that you're marketing your business, so that's the fourth component to that. Still finding time to do other things, and then there's family, and then there's life, right? So you really need a break once in a while, and possibly bring it as a habit with the family or otherwise individually to take time out and have a vacation. And last but not the least, have a proper work-life balance. And these are recommendations, again, that we're making, but we're also making based on what we've read and what we've seen. In fact, these are recommendations that are also made by the Law Society because they want to be able to provide tips that allows legal professionals at different stages of their career in that legal profession to be successful. And if you're frustrated, unhappy, you're tired, and you're really crappy about this whole process, then that's going to reflect in your work. And that's something that the Law Society doesn't want either, for many aspects, right? So that's one of the reasons why they put these recommendations. So work-life balance is very important. Find a way to keep that balanced and be happy with what you do. Manage your personal life better because that reflects in who you are as a legal professional many times, especially when you're dealing with people, because this is an area where you're not in closed doors, right? Because if you're an active legal professional going to court and all those good things, you're dealing with people, and this is very important. So with another 5 or 6 minutes still left, there's a lot of slides, and these slides are available on our YouTube channel. It's available on our website, and we'll be happy to share it with you as well. For purposes of time, I'd like to focus on maybe the final set of closures that we have before I can open up the floor for any questions. So a big part of the time management was the calendar management. And this is something I want to reflect on real quick. Find a way that you can maximize software, again, to automate the reminder system, whether it's ticklers or if it's to-do task lists out of your practice management. Today you have practice management softwares that have mobile apps that integrate with your local phone's calendar, because it's nothing better than a phone's calendar to be able to remind you of things you have to do. If possible, have a way that you can synchronize both legal work and personal work. And the reason I say that is sometimes these can overlap. So kind of having a unified view of your day across these two lives allows you to schedule tasks appropriately. Also, obviously, have the convenience of separating them out if they have to be done. And do have a weekly, if not a daily view of your calendar, as well as obviously a monthly and maybe a quarterly view of it. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, we really wanted to cover these 7 different obligations, right? If you've got the client intake done well, if you've done your business, file management of that matter that you've just created, you've taken care of all the correspondences and the way you've docketed time, inputted the retainer into your trust account, raised the invoice on a timely basis, move trust money from trust to general, or pay yourself directly into general if there's no trust, close out those files once they're done, right? And then reflect on your business as those revenue numbers flow into your business. If you have a HST account, deal with how you have to plan to file taxes, because that's a given. And then look at how you can grow as a professional, manage the time so that you're happy doing it, and have a very balanced work-life, personal life, so that you're going to come back doing that again and again, and be sustainable over a long period of time. It fundamentally comes down to these core aspects or subject matters within the obligation. And again, I would open the floors now for any questions that you have regarding the webinar. I'll be happy to answer. Yeah, I do thank everyone who's joined us today, because it's very important. As the year comes to an end, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other activities that are going to surround you. So it's very important that you're participating in sessions hosted by us and others in this industry, so that you have a more wholesome experience and a learning experience that's going to really empower you and enable you to do better at what you do. Thank you. Yeah, the question is, so we have a quick question whether we deliver these as seminars. We do have webinars. That's one of the ways that we communicate all this content. We do have it available recorded after this. It's available by Monday, Tuesday next week. In addition to that, we do present at colleges and universities. There's different content for different audiences. And we do have once a year uLaw practice huddle, or clients, non-clients, where we rent space and we actually conduct and deliver these CPD sessions. And sometimes we're invited by associations to come conduct these CPDs. So yes, that's a good question. We do conduct all the CPD sessions that we've been thankful to LSUC and other jurisdictions to provide us. We do conduct them at no charge across various places. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, feel free to send us an email with your participation today, so we can keep a record of that just in case the Law Society does ask us. And thank you once again. Any questions, please feel free to send us an email. And have yourself a great weekend. Thank you.